Presiding Officer, I was pleased that 4 parties in this Parliament put our differences aside yesterday to oppose Brexit. I was pleased that this Parliament has also backed a people's vote. The Prime Minister's deal will face certain defeat next week. I have never felt more confident that we can stop Brexit. So last night I was disappointed to see the SNP leader in Westminster arguing for the Irish backstop to be extended to Scotland. That's the discredited Irish backstop from Theresa May's discredited Brexit deal. Can the First Minister assure me that this is not the policy of the Scottish Government?
First Minister.
Right, yet again, I'm going to try in very simple terms to explain the Scottish Government, the SNP's Brexit position to Willie Rennie. I say this more in sorrow than anger. Willie Rennie and I agree on the issue of Brexit, and I do think it's regrettable that he keeps trying to find points of disagreement when actually it would be more powerful for us just to come together and unequivocally agree. My preference, like Willie Rennie's preference, is that Brexit doesn't happen. I want Scotland and I want the UK to stay in the EU. The only difference between us on that is if the rest of the UK decides to go ahead and leave the EU, I still think Scotland should have the right not to be dragged out of the EU against our will, which of course is a right we'd have if we were an independent country. But with the responsibilities of government that I have, I also have to contemplate how we protect Scotland if the UK does leave the EU and drag Scotland out with it. That's why I've always said, in those circumstances, if we're in the realms of looking for at least worst options, staying in the single market and customs union falls into that category, and I've argued that case consistently for 2 years. It doesn't take away from the fact that I would much rather see the whole UK stay in the European Union. And on the Irish backstop, we know why the Irish backstop is in place, but the point I have made is if we get into the realms where that backstop is activated, and I hope that doesn't happen because, like Willie Rennie, I hope we now have an opportunity to see Brexit reversed. But if it does, then the worst possible situation for Scotland to be in would to be at a competitive disadvantage with Northern Ireland, which is why we need to have at least the same relationship with the Single Market and Customs Union that Northern Ireland is going to have. And anybody in any doubt about that only had to listen to the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland in Belfast at the end of last week, saying that the Brexit deal, the Prime Minister's Brexit deal, gave Northern Ireland, I think I'm almost directly quoting her here, an unrivalled advantage in attracting foreign direct investment. There's the risk to Scotland in a nutshell. So to summarise, I know I'm taking too long, Presiding Officer, we want to stay in the EU, but if that can't be achieved, we want to see solutions that do the least damage to Scotland, and surely Willie Rennie could agree with that.
Well, she might want to try and explain all that to her Westminster leader. She should not try to ride both horses. We've got the Conservatives on the run. I mean, even the Tories don't agree with these stories over here. So we shouldn't be hunting for a compromise that's already been discredited. Every kind of Brexit will damage the economy. That is why we should be opposing every kind of Brexit. I am frustrated. I need to keep raising this with the First Minister. I know she wants to be reasonable, but how is it possible to be reasonable when it puts jobs at risk? So can I plead with the First Minister to reject all and every kind of Brexit?
First Minister.
Well, again, I do oppose all and every kind of Brexit. I don't want Brexit to happen. I want Scotland and the whole of the UK to stay within the EU. Where I would agree with Willie Rennie is I do think there is a greater prospect of achieving that aim now than there has appeared to be at any other time over the last 2.5 years, which is why the SNP will do everything we can to bring that about. But you know what? Willie Rennie describes as riding both horses. When you're First Minister, what that actually is working out how you protect Scotland's best interests in all possible circumstances. And if we can't achieve keeping the UK in the EU, then I have an obligation, which I accept Willie Rennie doesn't have. I have an obligation to look at what then best protects Scotland's interests. And if he can't see that, then that's perhaps a very good reason why everybody hopes he'll never be standing here as First Minister. But let me finally say, Presiding Officer, it surely can't escape Willie Rennie's notice that the only reason we are standing here at all having these discussions is that Scotland finds itself in a position of possibly facing being taken out of the EU against our will. This would not be possible if Scotland was an independent country. So if Willie Rennie wants to ensure, whatever the outcome of this Brexit process, and we both hope it ends with us staying in the EU, if Willie Rennie wants to make sure that Scotland never faces this prospect again, then the sooner he backs independence for Scotland, the better.